But yeah, very good. Okay, so the recording started. Um, Thank you for coming to this quarter's IT managers meeting, and I'll call this meeting to order. Our first order of business is just approving the minutes of the March 19th meeting. Do we have any corrections for those minutes? If not, I'm trying to remember what let's see, and in many organizations I'm with, they just get received. But I think we actually have a motion to approve and accept them. So, do we have a motion to approve the minutes of the March meeting?
I'll motion to approve.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Okay. So all in favor of approving the minutes? Okay. It seems the minutes pass. So we'll move on to our next item on the agenda, which is reports of CCS staff. So Rebecca?
All right. I actually have several items for you all today. So first, I would like to just welcome our new CCS staff members. They're not on this call, but we have 2 new staff members since our last meeting. Kiara Lyons comes to us from the Warren Newport Public Library, and she is our new Member Services Associate, which is a new position here at CCS. She will be doing sort of general support and training. So your staff are already getting to know her through Find More Illinois training and tickets. She's doing username tickets and permissions along with Bob and some other staff. So hopefully you'll have some good contact with her. And then Gayatri Shah started just this week as our new user experience specialist. She is a recent graduate of the Illinois Institute of Technology with a master's in user research, user design and research, and had a previous career in interior design, which is sort of another way of working with users to create usable functional spaces. So we're really excited to have her on the team, and she'll be starting to dive into everything. She doesn't have library experience, so we're getting her up to speed on kind of the whole library industry, in addition to the work that CCS does. So thank you in advance for being so welcoming to them. Other new stuff, we are of course onboarding our 2 new libraries, Mount Prospect and Waukegan. And I want to just take a minute to thank this group. At a previous meeting, we talked about IT onboarding and topics that we should make sure to include in IT training. So Bob and Deborah have been working on kind of a new IT orientation structure. So Waukegan had their initial IT consultation 2-3 weeks ago. Bob and Deborah worked with them, and Mount Prospect is actually coming up tomorrow. So thank you to everyone who provided feedback on, again, kind of what topics we could include to make the transition for new libraries as seamless as possible. More new things. Our training server is currently on Polaris 7.6. We are anticipating an upgrade to production sometime in August. It has not yet been scheduled. A lot of the new features in this upgrade are, again, focused on getting technical services parity in LEAP for the staff client. As discussed, we're not quite there yet, but still making progress. One security enhancement I wanted to identify was new SFTP support for EDI and some other processes. So that will be a little bit of added security for your acquisitions processes starting in August when we do that upgrade. just pausing for questions. I have a few more updates, but I don't want to ramble if you're. Okay. So then some project updates. CCS, specifically Bob, has worked with OSG to decommission our co-location space. So all servers that are not hosted, cloud-based, are now physically in our new office space, which has stronger infrastructure than our old office. Although coincidentally, as soon as we moved the servers, we had our first power outage ever at our office. So we do think the power outage was a one-time fluke at the office. There was a transformer, a blown transformer. There's 3 distinct buildings in our office park that are all connected, and only our building was affected. It was just our transformer. So we appreciate your patience through that downtime and don't anticipate it being a regular occurrence. Speaking of downtime, we have been having kind of an uptick in Polaris performance issues. So we previously had kind of a lot of back-end fixes in place to prevent the kind of issues we're seeing. And so we're following up with Innovative to see if those tools are still in place, if they need to be updated, if there's been any changes on their end, because we are kind of back in that unacceptable amount of service interruptions. So we'll be working with them to resolve those and prevent future issues as soon as possible. I have another Innovative update that we have as a separate agenda item. And then I know Mark has on the agenda to elect leadership for next year. Thank you, Mark, for keeping that on the radar. And then I just wanted to pose a quick question to the group, and I'll actually use a poll just so I can have it recorded. We don't always have agenda items for this group. So would you rather have 4 meetings on the schedule and we'll cancel if we don't have agenda items? Or would you rather just pare back and have 2 meetings scheduled based on, again, the number and kind of types of agenda items we've had over the past couple of years? So I have a poll up here. I'm happy to have discussion as well. But if you want to just pop, I see some answers in the poll. Thank you for that. And that is the sum of my report. I'll leave that open for a little bit if that's okay with you, Mark. It looks like actually just about everyone has replied. Oh, 100% answered. So I see there's a preference for 4 meetings from the majority of folks. So we'll go ahead and have those 4 meetings scheduled, knowing that we can always cancel a meeting if we don't seem to have any agenda items. So thank you for your feedback on that. And that concludes my my report.
I do have a question just based on what you said a few minutes ago. Do you have any idea what happened with the SIP outage on Sunday?
Yeah, so we're following up on that because we're not super satisfied with the answer they gave us. Essentially, what we heard back was that it was the same issue we've been having, which is with a job called the API Consumer Service Process Overnight Process, which helps manage e-content. So the response that we got is that job locked up and then created a cascading effect, locking up other tables, including the tables that SIP needed in order to respond. So SIP was receiving calls from vendors, like I could ping the SIP server without issue, but it wasn't able to respond with meaningful data. We're not super satisfied with that answer because of the amount of time the issue took to resolve. Typically, when we have an API consumer service job problem, we call support and they have it fixed within 10 minutes. Maybe 20, but as I think you're all aware, that is not what happened on Sunday. So we're pushing back on that a little bit. And again, following up, we previously worked with Innovative Support to set up a bunch of monitoring scripts on the back end that are managed by Innovative, but essentially they're watching for that job. And if it's running long, it preemptively stops it before it creates any problems. But as we've seen over the past few weeks, it's been creating problems. So the short answer, that was a very long answer, but the short answer is we're not sure. They say it was the API consumer service job. Okay, if it was, why wasn't it fixed sooner? So that is what I know about that. They also said it was Father's Day and they couldn't find anyone to fix it because they were all celebrating Father's Day. So I guess that's another push for more women in IT. But so I think it was a little bit of a perfect storm, but we will be pushing back a little bit harder on those responses.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Other questions for me? Yeah, thanks.
Okay, next order of business is our old business, and the only item of old business that we have is electing new officers. So conventionally, the previous vice chair is slated to be the new chair. That would be Michael from Wilmette. I had one response of someone who expressed interest in being vice chair next year, but I never received an actual yes, please put me on the slate, and they are not at this meeting at the moment. So I'm not sure that signing them up to vice chair is fair. That person would be Smruti Savakar from Warren Newport. And then I have received no one expressing interest in being secretary. So if Kevin Kruer is tapped out on being secretary, then we need to find a new secretary. Otherwise, if Kevin is willing to be secretary again for another year, then that fills that spot. So are there any volunteers for vice chair? It's a fairly low-key job until next year when you get to be chair, which is still a fairly low-key job because we only have 4 meetings a year, and it's sending out 2 emails and doing what I'm doing now.
And Mark, you can put me down for secretary.
Okay, thank you, John.
Mark, I'm comfortable if we want to confirm outside of this meeting with Smruti that she's open to that vice chair position.
Okay.
If there are no other nominations from the floor, I think we could plan that. And then if that doesn't work out with her, we could come back to the group and look for another volunteer.
That sounds so sort of
pending her acceptance of the nomination.
Pending acceptance of nomination, Smruti as vice chair. Okay.
Yeah.
I know I was expecting her because she also submitted several questions.
Yeah.
To the group. So maybe something came up and she wasn't able to be here. So. Okay. So with that, so why don't do we have a motion to accept that slate? So Michael from Wilmette as chair, Smruti Savakar as vice chair, pending her acceptance, and John Zavala as secretary.
Motion to approve.
Second?
But it does make sense in relation to the, absolutely.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, so why don't we vote on this by doing a little thumbs up icon. So so let's have a vote on accepting this slate. Why can I not? or if you, or just a physical thumbs up if you're on camera and want to do that. Okay.
I'll just say thumbs up.
That looks like certainly enough votes for to pass. I think we have a couple people who aren't voting members here. So at any rate, so that is our new slate for next year. Thank you for volunteering, and we'll double check with Smooty to make sure that she's fine with that. Okay, then we can thank you for all that, and we'll move on to our next item of business, or the next section, which is new business. First item on there is, I think, back to Rebecca, Polaris IP whitelisting.
Hello again. So CCS, probably like 2 weeks ago now, received a notification from Innovative that in order to enhance security, they're going to start requiring an IP whitelist for all staff client access. So this would be specifically for access to the staff client through the terminal server. It would not apply to Leap or Simply Reports. So that leads CCS to a question for libraries, which is, do your staff work from home? And if they do, are they connecting back to the library through a VPN, remote access, something else? Or are they working from their home IP? And if they are they using the staff client? We talked about this at executive committee last week, and at least for the libraries represented on executive committee, they reported that their staff all use a VPN or other remote access back to the library. So I'm just going to go ahead and launch another little poll asking if your staff, one, do not work from home anymore. Makes that a moot point. And if they do work from home, are they using their home IP address, or would they be working from the library IP by some various means of technology? So assuming that staff either don't work from home or already have a process in place to connect back to the library, CCS will send out just a quick survey to collect your library IP address range. I did see that a survey went out for the same information for the state library databases. So I'm going to check in with them to see if we can just piggyback and get that info from them. But if they're like not comfortable sharing that with us, I'll send out the same survey to collect that information. We wanted to make sure that we wouldn't be kind of hamstringing staff working from home without taking additional steps. But based on the responses, I think we have just about everyone represented. We have some duplicate libraries here. Staff either do not work from home or already have access set up. So we'll proceed with, again, just collecting your library IP ranges. And then if we come up with any sort of edge cases of staff that are like, oh, I really need the staff client access from home, we will discuss other options with them, such as using Leap, which will not be subject to the same restrictions. So again, we didn't plan this project. It came from Innovative. We don't have a specific deadline. It's sort of an as soon as practical situation. And again, it's just to tighten up security. Are there any questions?
I have a comment. I wouldn't I did not know of the survey until this morning, just before this, and based on what I've seen in the survey, I would not rely on it for much. The survey is only, like in our case,
the state library survey.
State library survey, yes.
Okay.
The state library survey is asking for what IP addresses your staff computers coming out on, and what address are your public computers coming out on. However, in our case, there are a bunch of addresses that should be counted that are not. For example, our VPN connections come out on a different IP address than our regular staff computer connections.
Okay.
So they would not be counted in this survey. So.
Okay. I'll just send our own then, and it'll essentially just be like a free text box for you to include any IP ranges that you feel you need to include. I personally don't think it matters for them whether it's I mean, I wouldn't put your public IPs on there, but like your public staff Wi-Fi. But you know, if you've got separate range for VPN access and regular staff, like staff Wi-Fi, staff Ethernet, whatever, just include them all in the box. Does that seem reasonable?
Yeah, seems fine to me. Yeah, I'm just saying I don't think the problem could be solved. You're not going to get necessarily a thorough answer just by getting whatever the state has collected.
And I just wanted to add to like the staff client usage. I don't know how everyone else has at the other libraries, but I mean, typically anyone using that is like in tech services or something else like that. And they're all on site because that's what their job requires them to do for the most part. Like it's very rare that someone there would go home and work from home. I just want to throw that out there as, you know, just the use case of that staff client. So
that was our initial thinking as well. And then when presented to executive committee, there were a couple of directors who were like, oh no, my staff do have work from home opportunities included. So I don't know. We just want to be inclusive of everyone. I agree with you, Michael. I was like, tech services staff generally are in the library with the things that they are working with. But yeah, it sounds like, you know, whether they work from home or not, you all have already taken the steps you needed to provide security and access for your staff. So we're covered either way.
Okay. Our next item in the agenda is a broad topic of AI, and I made subtopics of the AI question. So the first subtopic is a question about what steps or CCS, does anyone know what steps, or are there any steps that CCS and vendors have taken in supporting AI initiatives? I guess in this case, CCS would really mean probably Polaris, or Innovative.
Yeah, I don't have a great answer for like what Innovative is doing around AI. I feel a little like some of like the AI is like not actually AI when I don't know. Bob is doing some explorations around some data tools, which Bob, I don't know if you want to talk about that. It sounded like it was intriguing, but not the Tableau. Bob, you're looking at me, the Tableau AI thing where it was interesting, but maybe not super useful yet. You're on mute, but if you want to.
There we go. Tableau has functionality that they call Pulse, and it will analyze the data that you've presented and create statements surrounding that data. Percentages of this, percentages of that. It's not it's nothing that you could not do yourself, that you couldn't derive yourself. But in some cases, depending on the user, it may reveal things that you wouldn't have determined on your own. So there is that. What I'm very interested in is the partnership between Polaris and Library IQ. This hopefully will prove to be very beneficial to the CCS libraries. We will see. There's a few, at least one that I know, that's using Library IQ right now. I watched a presentation, a Library IQ presentation, and they have some really good ideas for analyzing your customer, well, not your customer base, but your service area, and trying to use that analysis to determine what you may or may not want to provide your patrons. I think this is one of the things that AI is going to do for libraries in general, is be able to crunch that data, your service area population demographics. And if it has enough information about a larger population, be able to determine what your population would be most interested in. I've heard that you can subscribe to lists that provide you with books or titles that you should purchase, and or just automatically send you these books, these titles every month. But I think those vendors who provide you with materials might be able to direct you in a better way if they would begin to use AI. So I don't know that that CCS will personally begin to use AI, but I think it's definitely intriguing for the library industry. We worked with, I worked with some guys over at Northwestern. I worked through Evanston, so I provided some data. What they're interested in doing is using AI to select titles based on the interests of the population. And they used holds and checkouts to determine the interests. So I think on top of that, like I said, on top of that, it's the demographics of the area and how that changes over time, right? Sometimes we're using older demographics, older information about the demographics. So keeping that up to date, again, that's kind of what I see AI doing for us. The other thing is on the front end, in the catalog. Most of us are already exposed to AI and we don't even know it. Anything that provides recommendations to us, whether it's Netflix or YouTube or whatever, they're using some sense of AI already to make those recommendations for you. So I think that the catalog really could benefit from that as well, although the patrons would have to identify themselves to tailor the recommendations in that way. So, it's like the Industrial Revolution, right? We did everything by hand before, and then all these machines were able to do it for us. That's really what AI is all about right now. It's gonna benefit in those ways. It's gonna help us do things that we're already doing. So, all right, I'll shut up for now.
I know on this front, something that I'd kind of like to see, although I don't anticipate it happening anytime. Well, it shouldn't be that difficult, but I don't expect to see it. Would be if in the catalog, like if you brought up a book that is that's not available, or that if you could search for something, and then it would do like a novelist check on read alikes that were on the shelf at your library.
That would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, something like that, where it's like, sorry, this book's not available, but it's very similar to these, which are on the shelf right now. That type of thing would be kind of cool. Or being able to dump in a list of titles that someone said, I like this book, and this book, and then it dumps into into something like Novelist, and then makes suggestions not only based on combining those items, but then looking at your shelf status and saying, here's what you've got currently that would be likely similar to these things. That would be kind of cool. But that would obviously require sort of connecting a number of resources and getting them to talk together.
Yeah, there's really like two sides. There's the patron-facing side that AI is going to help out in, and then the staff side where AI can help.
I'm curious to find out whether or not Polaris is going to provide APIs for us to incorporate into an AI sandbox for us, meaning that it would use a large language model, and then that would be able to query Polaris on anything we want. You know, I've been playing around with AI and Copilot at the moment, basically at the item level. And, you know, I could ask it really easy questions like, how many hotspots did I check out? And I don't even have to spell hotspot right. Or tell me what the average hold time is for a hotspot. And I'm pretty amazed by the fact that I don't have to write code to do this. I don't have to do really a lot of work. So it makes providing information to directors or other managers who may want to check on collections very easy. And that's because right now, if I have to write a report, I first have to go into the Leap, download something that may not exist, and then present it. And then I got to create an Excel spreadsheet or something like that, or use what you said before, not the Library IQ, but the other product that Tableau, to help present that kind of information. Anybody else agree with that kind of thought process, or am I just smoke dream?
I definitely agree. I could absolutely see some sort of LLM creating, like, based on a whole bunch of metadata, a very easy constructible profile that's tailored to either the individual user or the libraries, like, you know, incorporating things such as, like, when is this going to be available on ebook or audiobook, and which services, the amount of licenses, the hold time for those, like, just, yeah, the unification of all that data that can auto-generate a report for easy display rather than you manually going in there, I think would be very useful.
I think we're going to have to be very careful about AI hallucination. You know, if these systems are kind of geared at associating things and then just coming up with an answer that sounds correct, you know, that a lot of our staff are used to providing answers that are definitely facts, and there's going to be some filtering that's going to have to happen.
Certainly, there's a concern also with patron data, where we want to make sure that any large language models that we're using for this type of analysis get sort of limited to sort of general collection data and that type of thing, and not sort of leaking over into too much patron data or anything that could cause legal problems or ethical problems.
I think that brings us to the next bullet point there, which is AI policies, plans, and recommendations. What is CCS's feeling? What is the group's feeling as far as people, IT departments, or even staff members taking patron data? We'll just start there, and throwing it into an unprotected AI model. Say it's ChatGPT, the unpaid version.
I'm gonna go ahead and say I don't like it.
Right. What is there policies? Does CCS have a policy that says, hey, no, you can't do that?
We do not currently have a policy that specifically says, no, you cannot do that. our patron privacy policy says that essentially that like we are going to prevent unauthorized access to the database. So like Joe Schmo can't log in, only library staff can log in. And that essentially once library staff log in, that like the library is responsible for training their staff on appropriate patron data practices. So like if you download a report, your staff download any kind of report of patron data, once it's out of the system, it's out of CCS's hands. So like, we don't have a policy. I'd be curious about if libraries have a policy. I think it's an interesting question of whether or not CCS should, and if we should, what should it say? And like, what are the limits and the parameters? I mean, I think it's bad practice. I think general library principles say it's bad practice. I'm interested in hearing what discussion is happening at the library level.
I agree. It is bad practice. But I think it's the wild, wild west right now with AI. There are so many people with ideas to do things and want to try things, and I think CCS should have a policy that talks about AI, or maybe possibly look at the patron data protection clauses that are in there to include verbiage about AI. I don't think it should be so strong that it's going to stifle the thought process of trying to, for the good of everyone. But I do think to cover CCS's butt, I think you should have one in there. And as far as our library going, we are not actively looking, but we've brought it up, and we are going to think about an AI policy for our staff as well as our patrons, or something like that.
One question just on structure that I don't know, but I'm guessing. Our CCS policies basically those are generally voted on by the governing board, I would guess. Yeah. So that would be.
Yeah, executive committee can approve policies as well. But yes, they are approved by governance.
So yeah, so to at least to some extent, any new policies should be coming from the library directors themselves. So
yes, so we have a bylaws and policy committee, which actually is meeting this afternoon after this meeting. And so the bylaws and policy committee reviews and recommends policies, and then executive committee or governing board approves them. And then, we've got attorneys and stuff as well, just like your libraries.
Yeah, I think policy would certainly help. Certainly a lot of education, because I'm sure there are people that don't understand that the free version of GPT just sort of adds stuff to a massive database that then is searchable by other people. So if you understand that, then you should also understand there are certain types of data that you shouldn't dump into it. And I think the education element probably is going to depend. I mean, CCS probably can help with that, but I think it ultimately is going to depend on individual libraries.
So I've been working on that kind of a lot at Lincolnwood. We have a bunch of younger staff, and they are using AI. I'm looking at kind of federated, paying for ChatGPT, and then being able to control accounts. And I'm working on like procedures and training a lot. we have two management staff, one of which is kind of very anti AI, and another who is sort of pro, sort of, you know, ambivalent, which puts me in a really unique position of being able to try to find a good, productive middle ground. This is a tool, and we can use it effectively. So trying to kind of thread the needle to have our staff use it well. And if I ever get my policies completed, I can maybe share, or not policy, I'm sorry, like procedures and training. I can share that with folks.
I have a related question for all of you as IT professionals. So, you know, I hear you saying, like, with the paid version of ChatGPT, you can control what's stored and accessed. Do you believe them? I mean, when we look at, I mean, how many of our major service providers have had data breaches? Like, my password manager was like, you know, impacted. We look at, you know, Google's incognito mode, like scandal of, oh no, we're not collecting that data. I mean, how many times do we, you know, does Lucy pull the football away from us in terms of privacy and security, that we're like, oh, well, we paid for it, so of course they won't. Of course they'll adhere to like the practices that they say they're going to adhere to. And what's our responsibility, again, in terms of protecting patrons, to say, well, they said they would do it, so we believe them.
You kind of caught on two different things. One is whether the stuff does what it says it does, and the other is data breaches. AI doesn't change whether we're vulnerable to data breaches or not. And when you do put things into AI, I worked for IBM for 5 years in their cloud group. Yes, you can flag certain things as identifiable, which means, you know, identifiable to the individual, not part of the stuff that's being scanned or stored. Does it work? Yes. Can it be broken? Yes. But that kind of goes for any technology we're using.
And I can jump in more. So when I said before, like, you know, having paid ChatGPT to gain some control, that was overstating a little bit. I definitely think that there's going to be data breaches and information that is going to get out. But control, at least in terms of like on the staff side, staff would understand that, you know, they can't just go make like a personal ChatGPT account with their work email. You know, we're going to have this organizational structure to kind of start our AI work.
That's an interesting distinction, sort of setting, like I think you said before, procedures, like this is how we're going to do it at our organization. We're not all going to kind of be off on our own, jamming buttons and seeing what happens. We're gonna use a centralized sort of model.
Yeah, and I mean, I had a staffer leave, and you know, I asked them some questions before they were leaving, and some of them were about AI. I knew this person was using AI. You know, they said they deleted the account. Well, guess what? You can recover them within 30 days. The personal account. So I got in there and was able to, you know, no judgments. This person left on good terms, but to see like what they were actually doing and to use that to start to come up with kind of best practices and you know, this is how we can use AI in the best way possible. So I think users still have a ton to learn about AI.
I'm curious, what was that individual doing? I mean, it related to library activity.
Marketing.
Anything of value?
Marketing.
Okay. I'm that's kind of for me, that's a broad term. I'm not sure how that benefited the library or benefited the individual in their position at the library. How did they, that's what I'm driving for. How did they use it to benefit the library or, you know, enhance their ability to do their job?
Kind of as a co-pilot, sort of. But
oh, okay.
You know, I think there are going to be ways that I'm hoping to train staff to do that even better here.
Right, it could have been that that person wrote a press release and wanted it better. And so they asked AI, hey, if I was the director of the library, acting as the director of the library, how would I present this to my constituents? And you can even set a tone. You can say in an angry mode or in a very positive mode, and it will tweak your statements based on that, which I think is really cool. Marketing is an awesome area for AI, and also HR. I think HR is going to be really positive experience for AI. That third bullet point is interesting. Do you feel that the library staff and management is looking at IT for direction on this, or is it coming from another area?
I think, at least in our case, management is interested in. I know our director asked me about getting like the professional Copilot add-on to our Microsoft 365 accounts. She backed away from that when she found out how expensive it was going to be, but because Microsoft does not offer discounts to government or nonprofits on that right now, and it's $30 per user per month, which is maybe in business land not super high, but if you want to like give it to like all of your staff, that's pretty expensive. So, yeah, I at least in our case, the director is very interested in it. I think we have other managers that are interested in it, and so it's going to be an issue of figuring out exactly how to implement it economically and safely, that where it works best for our organization.
Here at the library, it's been driven by me, but I'm pulling in the director and some other staff. I don't know how to say this correctly, but I think people are still afraid about AI because all the hype in the internet, that you got to watch out. They're going to hallucinate. They're going to store your data. I know that's a concern, but it's almost too much rhetoric.
I was just gonna say it definitely depends on the library. In our case, like I feel like anything, like at least pushing that is more on the service end of how you're servicing the patrons. So in some cases you'll have, some of the more, I want to say technology adept staff, be using it for things like that. We have a department that definitely likes to, I want to say like try everything on the, like that's new kind of thing. And I think they're even going to have a couple programs on AI or something coming up. But, and again, for me, that's a strange thing because I'm not involved in any of it, right? Like I'm finding out about it as they're doing it. So it's kind of like a strange thing. So you guys are lucky in the sense that like you can motivate it, because then I find out and it's like, oh, what are you covering? How are you covering this? And maybe we should tweak this a little bit to, do that based on, their personal ideas and their experiences, because really they're experimenting with it and showing like, hey, people, this is something new, check this out type of thing. So I mean, there's a little bit of that, into it as well. So definitely kind of depends where you're at. Like, and I guess in my case, I just have a department that's like, very forthright in trying to utilize new technologies. So
it sounds like they're trying to educate the public. They're offering class, and that makes perfect sense because that is something that libraries have done for a long time. Whether it's offering a class on Excel or whatever the case may be, you know, programming your smartphone. But yeah, makes sense to me. But yeah, what they say, you know, I don't think we,
Well, and I mean, I think that's the whole point, right? Like, because what
yeah,
are best practices for it? It's a pretty new technology, right? Like, you can show the kind of cool stuff you do with it, but then do you have best practices for some of the stuff? And I mean, like for me, maybe it's like, maybe not entering some personal information or something else like that that you feel, you need to do or something else like that. Are you like making sure you're telling the patrons to also be wary of it as much as you're showing them the cool new thing? Does that make sense? Like, that's
yeah,
really,
absolutely. Yeah,
so.
because you want to be the authority on it. The library does. So you want to make sure you cover the pros and the cons, right? Yeah. I mean, you want to be the authority if you're going to hold a presentation or a class.
This all reminds me of Gartner's hype cycle. You know, I still think we're toward the peak of inflated expectations here with AI, and then it's gonna plummet and the trough of disillusionment, and then eventually, we'll get those best practices and have the plateau of productivity.
I recently read that it's very expensive to train a large language model on your data, and that only larger organizations would be able to do it because it is so expensive. Now, I don't know how much data they were talking about, but anyways, I offer that as well. Because like you said, you don't want it to hallucinate. You want it to give accurate information, and the more information it has to work with, the better. So I don't know if we can just feed it, a list of checkouts and check-ins and have it determine whatever. But training is the key, and then the prompt is the other key, right?
Okay, I don't, I think we've covered a lot of ground there. I don't know, if no one else has anything else to add with AI, we might as well move on to our next topic, which is ADA compliance for digital resources, which I know is it's been a thing for a while, but I think it's recently certainly come to the fore with new federal regulations that are going to be coming into effect. I have two subtopics for that, which are, the first one is, are people reviewing their ADA compliance in-house, or are they using outsourced reviews or some combination thereof? I think at the moment we're largely in-house, although we haven't gotten super far in what we're doing yet.
So we're talking about the website. Is
It's
that what you're mainly
beyond,
talking about?
it applies to more than just your website, but that's essentially the core of it. It also does apply to your mobile app, and then any documents you have available on your website. It actually applies to services that you subscribe to too.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, we've always tried to be as compliant. We don't have like a team. It's just me and another girl who do the web. And we recently, our director got in touch with the Office of Civil Rights, and they actually gave us a little webinar one-on-one, and they will take a look at your site and give you suggestions. They were very helpful. So we're going to make some changes, and then they'll look at it again. So if anyone's interested, it's the Office of Civil Rights. I can send out what information I have on them. I'm just saying they weren't judgmental at all. They were just helpful.
I think that'd be cool if you could send that information out.
Okay.
I would just back up what Linda said. I was speaking with some staff from the Antioch Public Library who are apparently this whole thing happened alphabetically. So I think that's probably why Linda has some good input. And so Antioch said the same thing. They were really, the Office of Civil Rights was really treating it as like a partnership and an opportunity, as opposed to like, you're in trouble for doing this wrong. And so she also just had a lot of positive things to say about them, given the situation.
I did attend a webinar that was put on by Rails, I think about a week ago or so, about this very same topic. And my takeaway was that if you have a ADA policy, or if you have e-policy that talks about ADA compliance, that's a good thing. And if you can see it from your website, that's a great thing. And if you also use alt text, ALT text, for all your images, buttons, things like that, you're going to, it's considered a very positive thing in the ADA world. It's not like you're doing everything you should be doing, but it's very positive, and you may not get a lawsuit or a complaint against your library. The other thing I took away was that it's a never-ending battle. I mean, libraries should not be accommodating for ADA individuals. You should just think of them always. It should just be a given that you're accommodating. You're not accommodating. You have services that will that people can use without even saying, "Oh, well, we got a special machine over here that you can use." That's accommodating. You just got to have it built in. So yeah, so I guess that scares me because I'm gifted, I guess, because I can see, I can hear, and it's hard to put my mind in an ADA type of environment, a place where I can't do things. It's just hard. So I don't know if we're going to be using outside sources to help us, but that's why I think the Office of Civil Rights, if you pass that information on, that'd be cool, because I'm sure they'll write a lot of input that we would need.
Does anybody employ? I know I went to the same thing he went to last week, and I'm curious if anyone is employing has like screen readers installed on their public computers, or anything beyond like the basic kind of accessibility tools that Microsoft normally, like Magnifier and those things that are just there by default. I know there's like a free screen reader software that can be installed, but I'm curious. I know a long time ago we had some stuff, but it's one of those things where you set it up and then like no one ever uses it, and when you replace the computer, you don't put it back on. My experience over many years.
We don't have that, but we did make a little booklet and have it at all of the desks of the Windows and how to use them, the Windows accessibility tools. So that's something,
That's
it's
cool.
not. We used to have a separate computer for people, but you know, that's long gone. Then the Lions Club, they gave us a magnifier for a while, but that's long gone. So yeah, you're just stuck with the Windows tools right now.
No, I think that's a good idea to include the free screen readers. I think one of them was NVDA. That was mentioned in that seminar, webinar. They said not to put bolt-ons on your website that can enlarge text or do it. They say that's just a Band-Aid, and for some reason the ADA, I don't know, he didn't go into details, but he said it's not a good thing. ADA people don't like those because they have a screen reader already at their home that can manipulate text and contrast and I thought that was a weird statement. He said, don't include it in your website.
Then one of the interesting things that she demoed was, it wasn't a screen reader. It was about people who can only use a keyboard and cannot use a mouse. This is something I never thought of. So you have to make sure that your website tabs in order and that they can get into the boxes. So that was very informative. I think that's something we don't think about. You can't use a mouse, so you're just tabbing through. And I think if you just do that to your website, you're going to be surprised.
Something I've done for years and have looked at recently. It was not mentioned at all in the thing from last week. Is I don't know how many people here occasionally use Linux. Well, I think there's a Windows version of this product too. The web browser called Lynx, spelled Lynx, like the Puma. Anyways, it's a purely text-based web browser. So you get a very good idea of how accessible your website is if you try to browse your website using it, because it doesn't show any images, it doesn't show any formatting, it's just text. So if you've got a, yeah, so I recommend checking out your website in that and seeing how easy it is for you to figure out what everything is.
It's been a long time since I used a text-based web browser, but that's interesting to do. What I was going to say, we're actually in the process of putting together an accessibility station that we have a staff member helming in another department. That they're choosing out the materials. We're going through everything to choose everything that we're purchasing for it. And I kind of agree about accessibility stations in some ways. I think it really is dependent on who's responsible for it. At Skokie years ago when I was there, they had a Braille reading machine and a Braille printer actually. But again, there was I think there were 2 staff members that knew how to use it, you know? So it was very much of a thing where okay, it's all this equipment's in this room. It's really cool that you have all this stuff, but how often is it being used and accessible? And I mean, to be fair about it, I mean, Skokie was large enough where we did have some regular people come in to use it, on a consistent basis, at least during daytime and stuff like that. But I was going to say that's again a use case scenario in which you have I would say you have it available, and at the same time you have patrons in the community that are actively using it as well. I think that also kind of dictates how useful having something like an accessibility station is.
Okay. There's a second part of that question, although I think we may have addressed it. Do you think this is going to be a big problem for your library? I think we've kind of covered that as far as. Okay, so if that's everything we have to say on that, the next item we've got is shared versus individual logins on staff computers. No, there was some question I saw. I think I saw it over email a few weeks ago about people asking about whether they use shared logins for computers or I just have people log in themselves. I know in our case, everybody logs in themselves, even pages. So we don't have very many, if any, shared logins anymore. But other people may be doing different things.
If you have a cyber insurance policy in place, they may have very strong opinions about that. There's no way to determine root cause or who was involved if you're using shared logins. They insist on MFA, which is multi-factor authentication, to prove that you are in fact you and not just there.
But on those shared logins, normally it's just a fixed station like a PC at an info desk, right? So the MFA has already been established for that particular account on that machine. You don't have to re-authenticate a second time normally.
But that's the problem. It's authenticated to the machine. The insurance MFA wants it authenticated to the user. You can't give a responsibility for an incident to a machine. It needs to be to the user. So they want to know that you are you.
Good. Thank you.
I think the use case for them is a little bit different. So like when we, or at least when I think of a shared machine or something else like that, like I would think of something at a circulation desk where people are utilizing the same application. Now, what would happen is it really is just the Windows user login that affects that in that regard, because if you're logging into any of the programs, whether it be Leap, you're using your individual login. If you're logging into your email, it's your individual login. If you're logging into any of the like applications on the machine, it's an individual login. It's just basically having it set up that way and have a use case set up for, let's say, for example, bookmarks and stuff like that, that are like, especially at the circulation department, if they need quick references for something where everything is uniform. That's what we're talking about, I think, when we're talking about that. Not so much like the user responsibility part of it, whereas like, yeah, obviously the user is responsible, but we're just giving them the access in that regard to do that. Is that hopefully that's a little clear or clarifies it. I think that's what John was getting at.
Okay, that at least seems that there's a mix of uses here. So, but no one seems to be adding anything else to this discussion. So, or at least we've hit a dead spot. So I guess we'll move on to the last item on the new business agenda, which is apparently people want to know what people are doing for their printing solutions and maybe how happy they are about them. I guess for both public computers and wireless remote. I know we're probably in a like a lot of libraries, we're using PaperCut for our public computers and ePrint for our wireless remote printing.
I was going to say, I think a lot of us are like TBS customers and so use those products, right? MyPC, PaperCut, and ePrint. They're both, I mean, they're all great products. Even the Scan, the Scan Easy Station they have is very nice as well, along with the software they provide for it. So granted, TBS is licensing it all and they're all different companies, but at the same time, I can't say that like any of those things are bad necessarily. Although I will say ePrinted had this weird thing where they, for the mobile forwarding of email for a period of time, they tried to limit the attachment or have a minimum attachment of 100 kilobytes. And then they realized that's probably not a good idea and changed it to 10 kilobytes. So if you are using ePrinted, just know that at least for now, it sounds like the service has a minimum requirement of attachment size of 10 kilobytes if you're forwarding any email to it.
That's interesting. It's strange to set up a minimum, but
It's probably because so many people have images in their signatures, which count as attachments.
okay.
Which I hate images and signatures. I feel like it's just screen clutter, but
This information, as far as what people are using, should be in that IT spreadsheet that we've set up. But I don't know, it doesn't really ask for opinions on whether or not we like the products. So we use Comprise. It works. It has flexibility. It allows us to charge different rates for color or black and white. We are changing our policy. We're going from, we used to have 20 free pages of black and white, and then we charge 50 cents for color. So now we're going to change that probably in the fall to 5 free copies. Doesn't matter if it's black and white or color. And then after that, 10 cents for color or black and white. And the software accommodates for that. So that's kind of cool. And it doesn't matter if it's wireless, remote, or on site. Comprise has a remote product as well that we've been using for a long time. And I've never heard any problems with that particular product.
I was gonna say, if there are any problems, it's usually on the side of how the software communicates to the printer or something else like that. But that's, again, on the drivers or anything else, so that's not usually something that's there. They're pretty standard. What was I gonna say? The other print service I've heard about is Print or something, I think Envisionware. I actually just signed some kind of contract with them. I'm not familiar with it, but I've heard good things about that print solution as well. But yeah, and actually I didn't even realize this, but for the longest time, I guess Envisionware now also has a cloud-based kind of PC reservation solution too as well. Just I point that out just as an alternative to the TBS MyPC and PaperCut and ePrint that most of us use, that Envisionware does kind of have an alternative now, at least. So
I think for us, the biggest pain point has been the NIAX credit card systems, just because we've had the worst inconsistency with the signals and then the devices breaking down and stuff. But I don't know what alternative credit card payment systems for the printing there are out there.
well, so the NIAX one is interesting, and I think it also kind of depends where they are placed in a way, because they use the cellular signal, right? So if you don't have good cell, or if there's something blocking there, it's going to be inconsistent, unfortunately. At least where we have ours positioned, it's fortunate enough where we don't have that issue. They've been working fine for the most part. I think we had one hiccup, I think a few months ago with them, where they had to update the firmware or something. But then after that, they've been working fine with all the options they offer and stuff. And the biggest thing about using them, I mean, obviously you could use other ones, but I think the biggest thing is not having to go through the PCI compliance because of how it communicates that way, right? So that's the only I guess I want to say the caveat to that. So I mean, it's a great system if unless you're having issues where connectivity issues like that. So
yeah, we've run into that firmware issue a number of times too. Signal issues aside, there's certainly one that we have where signal is just going to be a near impossibility no matter how many boosters we put on there. But we have had the firmware issues at least 2 or 3 times.
biggest issue with the NIAX credit card terminals has been TBS's inability to recognize how people expect self-service payment to work. Like with the copier, the terminal hooked up to their coin station on a copier that's just solely a copier, you theoretically need to tap your card to pre-authorize, and then once you make your copies, and then tap your card again to. And this only affects if you use tap to pay, because they're just like, oh well, people are using more tap to pay, and I'm like, yes, because it's 2024, and the fact that America is 10 years behind the rest of the world in credit card payment solutions is no excuse to just be like, oh well, we don't have to support that for real. And on the print release, it's equally confusing because people expect to like tap their card and then release their print jobs, but in fact it's release your print jobs and then tap your card after the fact. It's just confusing to everyone. So
Well, I mean, I think that's the nature of the print release, though. Unfortunately, you got to scan your card to get the print jobs first before you can see them and select them to do it.
No. I'm just talking about like people walk up and they like, because you could put money in the coin tower and then just scan your card and release your jobs and everything's fine.
Oh.
But no, you have to scan your library card, release your print jobs, then tap your card to pay, and then tap your card again for some reason. There's like 2 taps in both situations, but they're at different places in the process. And it's only if you're using tap to pay. And then just like, like everyone, like I walk around with one credit card in my wallet because I have a thing on my phone. Like I don't carry a wallet with like all my cards anymore. So Apple Pay is my go-to for everything. And anytime I can't use it, I get frustrated, and I typically stop shopping at a store unless there's a real good reason I need to keep shopping there.
I always just tell people to just touch and hold the credit card just for the entire transaction, because it's easier than trying to figure out exactly when it really needs to be there. But I agree, it's confusing and not ideal.
Yeah. And I've referenced to them repeatedly, I'm like, if you go to a gas pump and you card, and it doesn't matter whether it's insert your card or swipe your card or tap your card, you run your card, it pre-authorizes, you make your purchase, and then you are done. Same thing at a vending machine, which also uses NIAX terminals. I'm just like, I get really frustrated with them. So that is my frustration with our printing and copying solutions.
I was just going to ask, so then what pre-authorization, like what amount do you use? Because there's always been discussion about that. Like if you use like $10, $20, like how much do you actually pre-authorize when they do that?
Well, it's because of the way the 2 systems work, it's inconsistent, because the print release doesn't actually pre-authorize, it just fake pre-authorizes, and then that's why you have to tap your card a second time. But the copier, I think, is just $10. And because if someone needs to do more than that, they can run their card a second time. Yeah.
I'm just curious.
It's less of a pre-auth, I found, and more of just like a limit that it sets. Because we had it originally at $10, and then when patrons wanted to print $20, they couldn't, because the system just straight up wouldn't let them. So we asked TBS to raise it to 20, and they're like, yeah, sure, that's fine. And then recently we sent an email just as an inquiry, like, hey, what would be the issue if we said raised it to 100, just out of curiosity? And they're like, okay, we'll raise it to 100, and they did.
Well, and that's the thing with the printing, it's not an actual pre-authorization. It just, in theory, because a lot of people can walk up and tap their card and they're like, okay, I've put money in the system. It's just telling the system there's money, and then when they actually go to release their print jobs, they have to tap their card a second time, and that's when it actually charges the card the actual amount for the print job. Again, it's kind of ridiculous and confusing in so many ways. Like I've gone rounds with them.
Okay, yes, that is definitely a mess. Any more comments on that, or any other questions or comments or issues from the floor? Such as If not, that's the end of our new business. Our next meeting will be September 17th, presumably still on Zoom. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Okay.
Okay, thank you. We are adjourned, and have a great day.